The article by Charles Murray that I am discussing with him is up at PragerRadio.com. Hi, I'm Dennis Prager. And it's rare that I read something that deep that I just know how true it is. The temptation is so understandable. The temptation to the European socialist or welfare state secularism is very appealing. You describe, by the way, you use a word here that I use almost every day on my show, and that is bubble. The upper middle class bubble. It's one that is particularly apparent in a place like Manhattan, where I lived when I went to graduate school at Columbia, and I left it in some measure because of that bubble. It's you have a very funny line in your piece where people never meet anybody whose kid got under a 600 in their SAT.
Yes.
In their verbal SAT. Yeah, that's such a funny line, and it is true. And where that is the meaning to your life. If your kid got 750, then you know you have a meaningful life.
You know, I think that we have been undergoing in this country with the accumulation of wealth in the last several decades, notwithstanding our current problems. I think people have gotten enamored of a kind of glossy life. You know, they want just the right car, they want just the right house, they want their kids to go just the right schools, and then they basically move to gated communities, whether they literally have a gate in front of them or whether it's just figurative. And they all talk to each other, and I'm not talking about liberals versus conservatives here. I'm talking across the political spectrum. And this is the big problem, Dennis, if we want to revitalize the American way of life, which is that the upper middle class elites in many cases are not in love with that anymore. I mean, they don't cherish the kinds of independence and feistiness and engagement with your neighbors that have made this country exceptional. And that scares me, because unless they are in love with that, then it's awful easy to buy into the European model, because it's a lot less trouble to, sort of...
Yeah, but when their unhappiness is translated into what we need of is more European-like policies, not fewer.
Yeah, and this is where, you've got to start by making the case. And the way I put it in the speech is that it can be pleasant to lead a glossy life, but it's ultimately more fun to lead a textured life, where you are engaged in the elemental events of birth and death and raising kids and making a living and helping neighbors and being engaged in the world around you. And a lot of the attraction of the European model is you don't have to do that. Well, it's fun for a while, it's not fun for a long time, and it's not something that lets you get to old age and look back and say, I made a difference.
Charles Murray writes to review here that there are 4 institutions through which human beings achieve deep satisfactions in life: family, community, vocation, and faith. And yet the larger the government role in any of them, the smaller the satisfaction for us. So the larger the government intervention in family life, the less satisfaction we get from that. The larger involvement in community life, the fewer communal institutions we will make, which is exactly what's happened. Now we have vocation and faith, government involvement in job. What you argue is that for most Europeans, work is a necessary evil. It's not a vocation.
Yeah, leisure is more important. I mean,
that's right.
You've got the long
How much
vacation.
time? That's it. How much time will I get off? How much vacation time does that job allow me?
Yeah, and the vacation home is a big deal, and getting away from. And here's where I just ask your listeners to think of their own jobs, which may or may not be the best possible job in the world, but an awful lot of what defines who we are is whether we're good at something. And how do we express whether we're good at something? Well, for a lot of us, I'm one of them, it's what I do for a living. I mean, that's me. And lying on the beach is not me. I mean, that's just passive. So vocation has to be at the center, because for many of us, that is, I hate to use an overworked phrase, but self-fulfillment, that's how it happens.
And finally, faith. And that's not so much government involvement, I guess, in Europe as simply displacement.
Yeah, well, think of it this way. A lot of the reason that people pay attention to spiritual affairs is because of the prospect of death, let's be honest, and uncertainty and the rest of it. And one of the good things about the old days was that you knew you might die at any moment, and so you sort of had to think about that kind of stuff. And in Europe, where they have done very well at having easy lives in many respects, you can sort of indefinitely put off those kinds of considerations of life. There is, and furthermore, it becomes easier and easier the more of your neighbors who are putting this off. And let's face it too, a lot of faith's vitality comes from having to preserve itself. Compare the Protestant faith in the United States versus the Protestant faith in Europe, where it's subsidized. It's fascinating to me, the inevitability. The government cannot get involved in any of these things without messing them up. I think that's an iron law of life.
So I look at you, I hear what you say. I didn't know that you grew up in Iowa, so let me tell you why I have less optimism than you do, because you have optimism by the end of your piece for fascinating reasons, and I won't get into them now. They're too involved. But I've always thought of Iowa as the paradigm for the backbone values of our country. Yet Iowa is every bit as likely to vote along the lines of European welfare statism as Manhattan.
Yeah. Isn't it odd? Because I guarantee you that if you go out to Iowa, and I still visit there periodically, that community life in many ways hasn't changed that much. It's a phenomenon of good intentions and not seeing what happens down the road.
Exactly.
Iowans are very good-hearted people. They want to help other people.
And they mean well.
They mean
Charles Murray, we have your piece up. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for being on with me.
Dennis, I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Some summary thoughts for me when we come back.